Multi-stream. Fancy. It's crazy. Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're streaming to all the things.
Yeah, we're streaming to, well, not Facebook because I couldn't figure that out and I just didn't try yet again. But we are streaming to YouTube and Twitch
Okay.
at the moment. Though we haven't put out an announcement anywhere, so it's I don't think we have any viewers at the moment, which is fine. I just want to make sure that the audio is working.
It says episode 8, but I'm pretty sure this is 9.
That's fake news. Is it?
Our notes say it's 9.
But we're off by one, aren't we?
Oh, maybe we are. Maybe we skipped that one that says December 25th. That's very confusing.
Yeah, because I was checking my folder and it said 7 was last time.
We have some great notes for episode 7, which is people be hard on themselves and get stressed in their studies. Don't.
Those are the notes for 7.
That's the note for episode 7. That's all it says.
It's beautiful. Hold on, there's our faces. Okay. All right. Hello and welcome to the NativShark podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, brought to you as always with Nicholas. And today we're just... Oh, wait. Derailing my intro already. Man, really getting started here. Well, in the meantime, I can tell you that this show is brought to you by the NativShark platform, of course. And you can go there and get started with learning Japanese 7 days for free. Easy. Just get started. Well, I shouldn't say it's easy because we try to avoid saying that it's easy. But we do like to say is that it's simple. All you have to do is sign up and click study now every single day for many days consecutively and you will reach your goals. All right. There's the intro. We'll wait for Nicholas to come back. Oh, look at that. See, we got Wowza in the chat. Wowza hachi 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 hachi, which I'm guessing is a bit of an inside joke with the stream. He's doing exclamation point NS, which brings up the chat. Learn Japanese and more in the future at NativShark. Niko turned into a harp. Yeah, so Tai says hachi 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 is pachi pachi pachi. Yes. I'm aware, and it's hilarious. A bunch of clapping. Well, all right. Well, Nico's back. We'll Hey. How's it going?
Sorry, I was on a baby rescue mission.
It's all good, dude. It is a live show after all. Anything can happen. You never know what it's going to be.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yes. So it's all good. I did the intro, and now we're ready to get started.
Cool.
Nettogo. I see. Did you... Okay, here's a question.
Right.
Nicholas, did you know that hachi 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 is a netto slang for pachi 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 pachi? So people will write a bunch of 8s.
I'm pretty sure I've heard that before, but I've never heard someone say that. But I've read that before.
Yeah, I don't never heard anyone say it. I don't think anyone would say that. It'd be just, I don't know. You say pachi pachi, but you write hachi 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 hachi. Good meme quality.
Yeah. I think you spend too much time with Chie and she's just maxed out with the onomatopoeia.
I know, dude. She tweeted the other... Did you... I don't know. You never go on Twitter, but she had a tweet the other day.
Well, she posted that video, I think, right? It was like...
About...
The cooking one?
Oh, yeah. Just all the onomatopoeia?
Yeah.
Dude, I know.
But she talks like that, too. She's like...
That's true.
She has max onomatopoeia.
That's true. Okay, her tweet the other day was, I feel like there is a Japanese onomatopoeia for most things. There are so many in all caps.
Yeah, they're also, for me, the hardest thing to learn in Japanese.
Yeah, dude, it's true, though. Like, there are a ton of them, and people use them, like, so often.
Yeah, which is why I say they're the hardest thing to learn, is because they're not taught that much.
I've never seen them taught, actually, in any of my formalized Japanese studies. Never were.
Yeah, maybe. Like, I remember them teaching something like ame ga za futemasu or something like that. But
I mean,
like just you
well,
can't just
maybe
teach like three or four and then that's it. You know what I mean?
maybe you learned those in language school because like I did the college path, like the Genki stuff, and I don't remember that at all.
Oh, maybe it was in Japan. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe like Mina no Nihongo. I don't know. Needless to say, they're underrepresented in your
Yeah, and
educational studies.
when they're taught, they're taught really poorly. And part of the reason is that it's really hard to put them in a natural sentence because the natural sentence is often just the onomatopoeia, just by itself.
Right. It requires context.
And right, it requires context, but like most learning materials don't really have that. They just like have like the sentence that you learn.
Well,
It's like you
yeah,
fill in a blank or
they
something,
build
and
the context
but
with the entire sentence rather than giving you a context for which the sentence is going to be in.
because of that, if you're a student and you study Japanese, you'll think that onomatopoeia are always followed by like the particle to. It's like
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
nani nani to blah 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 blah, and it's like that's what I used to think. I thought you like had to do it, and then I came to Japan and made friends, and I realized people just say them as complete sentences usually.
Didn't you write a NihongoShark lesson about that?
Well, I mean, there's a lesson in NativShark on that as well. I forget
No,
what unit it
did
is,
you
but we
mention
have
in
the intro to onomatopoeia.
did you mention it in the NativShark one as well that you used to think that you had to say to at the end?
I don't know.
Because I
Maybe.
swear you've written that somewhere.
I'm sure I have, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if that was the NihongoShark one or the.
That might have been in the JLPT lesson on like one of the particle ones
Hmm.
back in the day. Maybe.
Back in the day. Yes, we need our onomatopoeia. It says what's that?
Yeah. Anyway,
Push
and
patch
another
to.
reason they were
Push patch
harder
step.
for me to learn is because they don't have kanji. So when
What?
a word has kanji, it's so much easier to remember it.
Some of them do like
Yeah, yeah. Some
Gyongo
of them do,
kana.
right? And sometimes there's a word that's technically like gyongo or gitaiga, which is onomatopoeia, by the way. That it is a word with kanji, but yeah, either the kanji's not always used, or people just don't realize it's onomatopoeia
Yeah,
because it's a common word.
yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Totally fair.
Yeah, but a lot of them don't have kanji,
De-
so that makes it harder for me also.
yeah, definitely. It's often katakana, huh?
Yeah. And then you can't say that to Chie because she's like, it's the most natural
Oh, I know.
sound for that thing.
She'd be
What
like,
are you talking
don't they
about?
just sound like the way
Yeah,
that they
she thinks
sound?
that like we should be able to just guess them correctly.
Yes. And I'm like, I'm sure that's accurate if you are Japanese and you grew up in Japan as a child. I'm sure that's how it feels.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, of course, a bee buzzes. What else could it do other than buzz? Bzz,
Right,
right?
right, of course. Absolutely. But that's how, that's how we learned
Yeah.
it in English, so same kind of vibe for sure. Well, that was a nice.
Yeah. When I see pach 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 though, I just think of like clapping your hands, pach 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 pach.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
I mean, yeah, I hear it all the time when people talk to my son when he's clapping.
How does that make you feel?
Whatever.
You don't mind? That's good. Um, yeah, so I have a question for you.
I'm ready for it.
It's a serious founder life question. Okay?
Okay.
Do you eat breakfast?
Sometimes I did not today. It depends. I eat breakfast probably like 5 days a week, but breakfast is like a handful of mixed nuts or something usually.
Hmm.
Um, and then lately, a couple days a week, I just don't eat anything until dinner.
Wow.
Just doing a little intermittent fasting.
Go that intermittent fasting life.
Yeah. So 20-hour fast.
So no breakfast usually. Is no
Well,
lunch
usually,
usual?
Yeah, I don't really eat lunch like ever.
I
I
said,
don't like to eat lunch because then I lose focus on work after. I can't focus if I eat a meal during the middle of the day. I can have like a little snack or something, but
mm, that was my follow up question. Then is what makes you feel productive? Like, okay, so
oh,
what do you have? So what do you have to
yeah.
do? Right, you're saying if I eat a meal, I feel unproductive because I get tired. Right. So my question is like the framework of my question is you're a founder of a company and you have a family and you do a lot, right? How do you fit it all in?
Mm.
Like, how do you do so? How's your output so high day after day, week after week, year after year at this point? And so that my entry to that question was, do you eat breakfast? Because I already knew the answer, but
Yeah, you're cheating.
I'm cheating. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
kind
then
of
I
like,
should clarify that even when I eat breakfast, it's like if I do have like mixed nuts or something, it's sitting on my desk while I work because I hate eating something that requires two hands to eat or that requires my focus on it. It's like I love the taste of soup, but I don't like eating soup because I have to pay attention to it or I'll spill it all over me.
gotcha.
Um, which kind of goes sounds like it's not related, but on the issue of time management, maybe a long time ago, 7 or 8 years ago, I just stopped caring about what I'm eating. And the same way I kind of stopped caring about what clothes I'm wearing. And part of the reason is I don't want to use willpower thinking about what I'm going to eat or wear for the day because I need that precious willpower to do other things like get work done. And part of the reason for food initially was that I wanted to be really open to trying and eating anything
Hmm.
in Japan. I moved here in 2013 and I just decided that I was just going to eat anything anyone was eating. I was going to just be super open to everything.
Yeah.
So to do that, I had to just stop caring about what I'm going to eat. Like, because if I thought about it, sometimes it's not what I wanted to eat, what everyone's eating or like asking me to eat. And then over time, I just realized I much preferred not thinking about it. If I go to a restaurant with someone, like I'll choose what I'm going to eat within 5 seconds looking at the menu. I never read everything on the menu because it just feels like I don't want to use my brain power on something like that. What I do want to use my brain power on is stuff that adds value to the world for other people. So something like, writing, for example. So you asked, I think you asked what makes me feel productive.
Yeah.
And making something. So usually that means writing or it means creating a page or a design for something for the site. If I woke up at like 5 in the morning and I attended a meeting, even if the meeting was really useful and productive, I would not feel like it was a productive morning for me.
Mm.
But if I woke up and wrote a lesson or I wrote an article for our blog or I reviewed a bunch of translations by translators, more so if I actually translated them myself, then I
Mm.
would feel like, oh, this was a productive morning. So I try to do stuff like that, like heavy stuff that requires lots of brain power. I try to do it first thing in the morning because I'll feel really excited if I used my brain to make something.
Mm. And
What
that,
about you?
well, I was
Do you
gonna,
eat breakfast? Do you? Oh, okay.
well, I was
You can
gonna, I was
follow up
gonna follow up
first.
with just a bit, and so, we'll reverse in a sec, but, um, do you think that whether or not you feel productive has a significant impact on whether or not you're actually productive?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. So, do you think there's like a correlation between the two that if you don't feel productive, then you're also not productive? Or do you think that sometimes your mind deceives you and you were actually productive, but you didn't feel so because of XYZ reasons?
Yeah, I'm sure that happens. I think it happens less than it used to
Hmm.
in the past, um, because I'm I feel a lot less frantic in the amount that I'm trying to get done every day. Whereas I think I've put a lot of pressure on myself in the past to study. Like, I would feel like I wasn't productive if I didn't learn new words, for example, if I didn't study something new for Japanese. This is back before we were doing NativShark. Whereas really, even just doing your reviews for the day is very productive.
Right.
Um, and I would feel super guilty about it. And I was thinking just yesterday how you remember Ego Boost, that
Mm.
site that I had that was in Japanese,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it got like 100,000 visitors a month or something.
Uh-huh.
For those who don't know, it was a website that I made, a blog in Japanese about learning English. And I used to have these really long lunch breaks when I taught English in Tokyo. They'd be like 2 hours long. And I would write these articles during my lunch break. So because we had these long lunch breaks, I would be at work for like 10 hours. And
Oh
during
yeah.
my 2 hour break, I'd be writing these articles in Japanese for this blog and sometimes going and asking the Japanese staff like how to phrase something or if I'm using the right word. And I did not really think I was being productive back then. Like I don't know what I was thinking, but now I look back on it and I'm like, whoa, hey.
Yeah, how did you do that?
Because in the morning I was studying Japanese and
Yeah.
then I go to work and then during my break I was writing these articles.
Such an
I
efficient
finished
use of
work at like
time.
10:45 p.m. or something every day.
Yeah.
And yes, I think a bit of perspective is helpful.
Mm, definitely. I mean, for one, that's such an efficient use of time, and for two, it's no surprise that you've been such a prolific writer over the years, if that's what you used to do for fun. Um, so yeah, definitely. I think. Oh, the final thing I was gonna add to that is that perspective. I think perspective matters a lot. Um, I think it's really easy to forget that and look at your life or your actions very narrowly because you're the one that's living them. Um, but trying to look at it from another angle or have conversations with people who help you view your life from another angle. I don't know. Lately, I've been finding that to be really beneficial to like both my view of myself, so like mental health, I guess, and also my ability to keep things on course, like for the company or for my own life. And I think in the last year, that was one of the things I was missing from my life was taking into account like my actions, whether for the business or personally, from different perspectives other than mine, which was or the people directly around me from which we were living it day to day. And lately, I've been able to have conversations with people, um, and they've been able to provide perspective on some of the things that we've done. Like you just now telling me that you wrote articles during your lunch break. That's crazy. That's like really
Mm,
impressive, and that unlocked a lot for you later in your life by being able to do that. But at the time, I'm sure it didn't feel like much.
yeah.
You know. Um. Anyway, that was a bit of a
I
side
th-
path.
well, I think also the part of the way that I've grown when it comes to productivity and stuff is I try to really take a long-term view of things now.
Mm.
I have the worst case of something new syndrome, like shiny butterfly syndrome. There's the new thing that I think of that I want to do, and it's very physically painful for me to not do it right away. And it's taken me my entire life to have the wherewithal to think, yeah, that would be great. But if I'm going to do it, what am I going to not do?
Right.
Because, for example, like just yesterday, I saw Ty was doing his personal stream after work, and he posted in
The community
there's what's the channel
community
for
content.
community? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a community content channel in our community. So like if you have a stream or a blog or something, you can post, and other students can go look at it. He posted it, and so I went and I was chatting for him for a minute because this is after work.
Mm.
And then I was thinking, oh, that's so cool that he has his own stream. And I was imagining how cool it would be if I did my own stream of like my studies or
Yeah.
whatever. Maybe do one in Japanese, like for Japanese people or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sounds really cool, but what am I not going to do if I do that? Because there's other stuff I want to do also. It's like I want to learn all these languages, but what am I not going to do if I do those? And so
Mm,
what I think about now is not, I think both, can I do it right now? Like, is it feasible? Let's say I want to learn Korean. It's like, what time of day am I going to study for Korean? And then the other thing I ask myself is, am I okay with studying Korean pretty much every day 5 years from now?
mm.
Because if not, then why am I trying to learn it right now?
Right. Because it's a long-term commitment, so you're trying to take the long view on it.
Yeah. And am I likely to continue doing a stream 5 years from now? I don't think so, because I just don't see myself doing it. Like, if it was a blog or something, I for sure would do it because, I
Right.
like writing and it's effortless to me to wake up and write, or like if I have 30 free minutes to sit down and write something.
Gotcha.
Whereas it would be a lot of like emotional effort for me to stream, I think, or do anything that requires a camera or a microphone.
So, are you saying
Um,
that there's not like a place for things that you in your life right now that you don't feel like you can commit to for the long run, or do you feel like there's some value in doing things for a short period of time? Like, let's say you did stream, but you only did it for 6 months. Would you view that as a net loss, or would you view that as a net positive, or are you saying you wouldn't even start that because you didn't think it would last? Like, what's like the value? You said 5 years, but like, what's the duration of time that you want to be trying to do something for?
yeah, it depends what you want out of it.
Mm,
I don't think it'd be a loss if I streamed for 6 months, because I would learn how to stream and I'd get better at performing and talking and all those things.
yeah.
If it's a learning experience, I do think it's worthwhile if that's the goal, right?
Mm,
But if it's something like learning Korean, the goal is to talk to my family in Korea,
right.
and we will probably live there at some point in our lives. And I want to not be a child depending on my sister-in-law for
Yeah.
everything. So to be at that level of Korean, it's not going to be let's study for 6 months. It's going to be let's study the rest of our lives.
Right.
Because it's the same with Japanese, right? Like, yeah, I'm not like a child in Japan anymore, and I can do anything that I want here. But I don't mind studying Japanese even now. Like, I would be happy to study it every day the rest of my life because I just really love the language.
Yeah. And when we get
And you
our
do read. Oh, go
when we
ahead.
get our phase 4 content and beyond that, I'm sure you will study again.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. You once you reach a certain level, you hit, event horizon, as I like to call it, where
Yeah.
the black hole is too strong to pulling you so that you cannot unlearn the language because
Right.
it's all around you. But that's only true if there was something relevant pulling you to learn the language in the first place.
Of
Like
course.
if you get to the level where, you're a phase 3, phase 4 level student because you wanted to play video games in Japanese and you quit studying, you're not going to forget Japanese if you still like playing video games in Japanese, because you can probably do it now without too much work.
Hmm.
So there is a level when you don't have to keep doing it. Like I shouldn't say you're going to need to study Korean or Japanese the rest of your life, although I kind of like to because I just like learning.
Right. Well,
But
if I may, I think
yeah,
you pointed out the important part and kind of what I was looking for, and you said depending on what your goal is. That's the answer.
yeah,
If you set what the goal is and it makes sense in the context of your life, do the thing for the duration of time such that the goal is met. And in your case with Korean, it's like, well, you have family that's Korean, and you would like to live in Korea in the future with your family, and you don't want to be incapable while you're there. So that goal is relatively long term. It's relatively high level. So to reach that goal, yet there's a fair amount of work. So it does make sense that you would say something like, well, it's going to take 5 years. Um,
yeah,
versus streaming, it's like, well, you don't really necessarily have a goal with that one. So that's why you're able to say, well, okay, maybe I won't actually start it. But with
yeah,
starting another blog, like that is something that you would have fun doing, and you could do it piece by piece over time, and it would build up value because you already know that building that kind of, building an audience has a lot of value. So in that sense, a goal like that, does make sense.
Yeah, I actually am starting a blog, but I haven't shared it with anyone yet. But I've written a few posts, and it's interesting you mentioned goals because my goal with this blog that I'm creating is to number one just write down the things that I'm interested now,
Hmm.
and to think more clearly and um, present opinions and arguments more clearly and succinctly. It's not like an end goal. Like I don't have like
Yeah,
a
I hear
make
that.
100 grand a year or something
Yeah.
goal. Which, if I did have a goal like that, I wouldn't write a blog that's sort of just all over the place.
Yeah, of course.
I would have a target audience and target market
Right.
and plans like a real business.
It's
Um,
interesting that you mentioned that being the intention of your blog, because I started a podcast around the same time that you started the blog for the same reasons. Like the reasons for my podcast is the same. I want to have a place where I can over time like measuredly see the improvement in my ability to present an argument and an opinion and learn to speak better. And there's not necessarily a target audience. It's just I want to build a community and an audience that is um, interested in, like, I guess viewing the world in a specific sort of way that I'm kind of like discovering with the podcast. And I host that with a longtime friend of mine, with Trevor. But I don't know, it's interesting that we both started a side project at the same time that has a similar end goal, which is necessarily not any specific end goal.
Sort of on that same thread, I talked about learning languages like it's only worthwhile if you're going to do it a long time. But I'm going to do phase one of every language that we teach on NativShark.
Hmm.
And I'll probably quit after that. Like when we teach French from English, for
Yeah,
example, I'm totally going to do a phase one French.
right.
And I'm going to stretch my brain by trying to pronounce things correctly and all that stuff. But my goal is going to be to stretch my brain and to just have some fun. Maybe go on a trip to France after or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I hear that.
yeah, my son was watching some like YouTube video where they all sing and stuff, and it was in French yesterday. And I noticed that I suck at pronouncing French. So now I'm really interested in Native Shark French someday because I want to have our pronunciation tools and shadow loops to
Mm,
help me figure out how they're saying things.
man, you saying that just gets me excited for learning a language again. I
Right?
really, you know this, but I really want to learn French to a pretty high level. Um, when it comes to learning to phase one, you say like I'm gonna learn a phase one and then stop, but think about how high of a level just a phase one of Native
Yeah,
Shark
that's what I
is, right?
mean.
Like
But if you do phase one,
you're
you
functional.
could probably go to the country, like have a great trip, make some friends,
Yeah,
and you could probably even quit there and like with especially with a language that's like a romance language, you could probably just do phase one and then just figure the rest out as you go.
yeah. I mean,
If that's the way you like to do things. I mean, if you want to have like a well-rounded education, then probably not. But
yeah. Man, it just makes me want to get that stuff out there so bad. Hmm.
yeah, I'm hurting for Native Shark Korean and Native Shark Thai.
Yeah, well, Korean, I'm sure will be soon. I have no idea about Thai.
Thai. Everyone's like Thai. Like no one cares about learning Thai except for me and Ray.
I don't think that's true. I definitely think there's a market for Thai. Um,
There is, but it's
it's
it's just
it's
small.
not as big as the English to Korean. Or slices poor Thai. Nice pun. I like it.
Thai wants to
Thai
learn
wants to
Thai.
learn Thai. Yeah. Um. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we should teach it eventually. It's just about like resources and scaling. You know, how can we manage
Yeah,
our resources best? How can we stretch them? You know, what's the best way to expand this kind of thing? You know, right now we're on a like a slow growth, and I think it's a term in SaaS companies that people use, like a slow growth trajectory, where you make your resources last as long as possible while still developing a new product. So it's not like what do you call it? I can't remember the name of it. It's where you just like you leave. You get it. You get a SaaS product at a certain point, then you calculate how long it could technically last without any hardly any input into it, and you just kind of like stop working on it, and then the revenue hits a peak and then declines. That's another part of the SaaS life cycle. And then the other one is like high growth, and that's when you get injected with capital, and then you just kind of
Yeah.
you basically never hit
Throw money
profit.
at the
Yeah,
problem. At the
yes,
problem.
you never hit profitability. Well, not never, but it takes a really long time to hit profitability because you're constantly growing the company. As soon as you get money, spent, money spent, money spent. Whereas slow growth is like taking things slower for the goal of profitability. You might even be profitable while doing a slow growth strategy. Um, Currently, that's where we're at. Though I would not be opposed to switching over to hypergrowth when it makes sense, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will. Honestly, I think it will for
I think
Native
it
Shark.
will at a certain point make sense once all the systems and processes are in place.
Yep.
Um, and we've done it for a few paths. There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
If we know it's the if it works. Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
The whole thing.
Right. That would be, just to clarify for anyone listening, that would be like a Series A level of commitment, rather than seed, which is kind of where we are right now. For seed, we're either going to raise a smaller amount of money, think between 350,000 to 500,000, or we're going to keep doing what we're doing now and do it ourselves over time. The difference between raising seed and not raising seed isn't that we immediately go into hyper growth. It's that we build a sustainable product still over the next year or two, but it comes with a lot more stability and the pace is a little bit faster. Like that's the big difference between the two. Whereas what we're talking about with hyper growth, that'd be like we've already finished the 4 phases of Japanese. We've already flipped the direction and shown that we can teach another language. So this is probably teaching English from Japanese. Maybe it's teaching Spanish, something like that. And then we have the packaged system, right? What we're building right now, the content creation system. That's kind of like packaged. And then once we've done it with at least one other path, and we've seen that it works, and we've got the numbers on, this is how many people will sign up for a phase one in this amount of time period. This is the amount of revenue that it generates. The return is X over X period of time. Once we know that, that's when it makes sense to go into hyper growth. If we want to at that point in the future, we go and try to raise a Series A, and then we bust out to 50 new products at once or something like that. But at the moment, we're focusing on that iterative growth, do what we can over time.
Speaking of setting up nice processes, I was really excited because, as you know, we added a new freelance female voice
Oh,
actor, I guess voice actress,
yeah.
to our team yesterday.
Hmm.
And when I was interviewing her, first I asked her to send me a sample of a sentence that I gave her. I gave her the context of it and then told her the sentence to read. And it was not good. The audio quality was good, but she, it sounded like a textbook recording
Hmm.
because she had experience doing voice acting for Japanese learning materials.
Right.
And so I sent it to Ray and I was like, hey, can you just write down the feedback for her? And I'm sure she copied and pasted from the documents we have for the other voice actors. And she just sent me like 1, 2, 3, a 5 bullet point thing. And I sent it to the voice actress and I said, all right, give me a new sample. And she did. And sounded pretty good. And so I said, all right, let's try it. And I gave her the work contract. And within a couple hours, she was already in our group in Discord.
Hmm.
Um, she had joined our content platform software that we use and recorded sentences and followed the instructions and was doing it correctly. And I cannot fully express
That's
how
amazing.
happy that makes me because most people won't know just how much we suffered to make that happen.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on pulling that all together. I didn't even know that it had come together so nicely. Yeah, so
Yeah, like her first day,
wow.
she's already done like 50 sentence recordings or something.
That's great to hear. See, these are the
Yeah,
systems. We're getting there.
processes.
Yes, almost. That's great.
Yeah, for those who are curious, I'll tell you some of the feedback that they gave her on the sentence recording that she sent that was not acceptable. Because people are probably wondering, like, why, what am I talking about? Or, like, what? I always
Mm,
talk about how, like, the audio is so important to us and ours is different than other people's audio. And then how is it different? So, what she told her, and I'm gonna just be interpreting this on the fly because she wrote it in Japanese and I'm just reading it. So, first thing was there's no need to put spaces between clauses or punctuation because they do that, right? If
mm,
there's like a particle or something, like in a textbook, they would pause.
right. Do you have an example?
Watashi wa Niko to moshimasu, like
Ah,
that kind of thing.
yep. I hear you.
Tori wa sakana o tabemasu.
Mm,
Just like
yep, yep.
that. Um, whereas people don't pause like that in everyday situations unless there's a reason to.
Right, right.
Okay, that was point one. Number two was I'm translating. Okay, you do not have to intentionally pronounce things so that they are easy to catch. It's probably not a good translation, but so like don't intentionally say something in a way that it's easy to hear what you're saying.
Mm,
This one's really hard if you have experience talking to non-native speakers. I'm bad at this in English now because I've been talking to Ray in English for so long.
right.
Like I just naturally say things in a way and make pauses in my speech so that they're easy to understand for a non-native speaker.
Over enunciating is what Ursula is
That's
saying in the
part of it,
chat.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
So the next one was if the context is an everyday situation, do not think at all about the fact that this is for a learning material and just talk as if you are talking in your own everyday life.
mm. Yeah, definitely. People understandably have difficulty doing that because even like I do, right? If you tell me to record audio for something, it's I have to put myself in the right frame of mind, and naturally, I'm not going to unless I have those, that feedback in order to make it sound the most natural as possible. Like in this podcast, um, we're just having a conversation, and this is the kind of audio that more or less we are trying to get people to create. I'm not over here trying to make sure that I sound super eloquent when we do this specific podcast. You know what I mean? Because it's just a conversation between the two of us. So if someone out there is learning English, like this kind of podcast, hopefully would be the kind of thing that they could listen to be like, oh, this is just people chatting naturally in their native language. You know?
Yeah, if they're at a level that they can understand what we're saying to begin with.
Yep, for sure.
Um, the next point was the speed should be about the speed that two Japanese people would talk to each other. So,
I know why
you
she's
know,
saying that.
you're a Japanese person talking to a Japanese person is the
Yeah,
speed at which you should talk.
right. Not a Japanese person talking to someone that they perceive as not having full like comprehension of what they're saying.
Yeah. And then at the end, she said, but the most important thing is to just make it match the context.
Definitely. Because now that we have contexts written for our senses, we want the audio to sound because like meaning and such can change depending on how the audio sounds. The show?
Yeah. Yeah. And just because that's really like those first points is basically just unlearning what you've learned by being a voice actor, right?
Yeah.
If we hired someone who had no experience recording something for a learning material or just even being a voice actor for anything, then all we should technically have to tell them is just make sure that your recording matches the context.
Mm, essentially.
But people just come with a lot of baggage when they get a job for voice acting.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, it makes sense, like, because
yeah, we have to
usually,
peel off all these
yes.
unnecessary layers first, and then say, okay, now just match the context.
So, because, well, here's the thing. Usually, when you're voice acting, you're voice acting, right? But what we're trying to do is get people to just record the non-acting voice, their actual, how do I converse with someone voice, because that, that's our focus with our audio and our platform, is to get people to understand
Yeah.
real life.
And part of the reason it's like match the context is because we have context now, like even in the sentences going through the flow, that'll say things like, you're the main character of a manga or something. And so like now we're not talking about everyday
You're right.
conversation.
In that case,
Basically, you're a character in anime and you should sound like one.
right. So sometimes we do want people to actually act.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
And then other times we're gonna have ones that say like the context is an example for like a JLPT prep book or something,
mm,
because you do need to know what those sound like, because you're gonna hear them if you take the JLPT or if you interact with a lot of materials out there that are made for non-native speakers or children or things like that.
right. So when are these contexts going to start showing up in the platform, do you think? Is that a development bottleneck right now, or is it still a content bottleneck?
Well, we have the one remaining blocker, which is that we haven't connected our CMP to this new content workflow that we've done, but that's almost
Oh,
fixed.
okay. Gotcha.
And then after that, it's mostly a content one. So like all the new units in phase 2 that come out have context written for every sentence. And then I'm about to start sending all the phase 1 sentences through the workflow again so that they have context added to them.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
And I'm not sure how long it's going to take, because there's like 3,000 sentences or something
Right.
in phase 1.
So you're saying you got to backdate.
Yeah.
You got to backdate
Yeah.
the sentences. So that's going to take a hot minute. But all the new content coming out does have the context already added.
Yeah. And the reason we haven't been doing the phase 1 context yet is because I want to make sure that all of our content workers, like our freelancers and our internal team, knows really how things should be done and written.
Right.
So I don't want to train a writer to write things for a sentence they can't change.
Yep.
If I give them a phase 1 sentence, it's like, don't change the sentence, but write context for it. They're going to be like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm training them, I'd rather be like, hey, use this word and write a sentence and context for it. And then once they've gotten good at that, I'll tell them, okay, now here's a sentence that you cannot change, write context for it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good approach. Yeah, so I guess that sort of ties into the other thing I wanted to kind of bring up, which was, as we're, looking forward into 2021, it's still January right now. It's January 13th. The things that we want to do with NativShark, where we want to go, which we've kind of been talking about, but to put it into just specific words, we're starting with like a slow unit rollout, but faster non-path content. And then as time goes on, as resources allow, we will move into quicker unit rollout. Because I feel that new units specifically is one of the most important things that we should be working on and that we need, because it is what makes NativShark what it is. While the non-path content is amazing and it should exist as well, I view it as slightly less important as new units. That said, and I think this is probably what Niko is thinking, it's a bit easier, quite a bit easier.
A bit.
Quite a bit easier. A lot, okay,
It's
a lot easier.
exponentially
A lot
easier.
easier to make non-path content. So there's going to be this like crossing of graphs period where new units are like, maybe it's one a week, but there's a lot more non-path content coming out. That's going to probably be the case for a while until a new unit rollout can catch up, because it takes so much more resources to create. And then hopefully they come out roughly the same speed, or in fact, units might even start going even faster than non-path content. But for the foreseeable future, well, not foreseeable future, for the next couple months, it's going to be this way where units are slower than non-path content. That's kind of what we're looking at for 2021. Comments on that, sir?
Yeah. Well, if you count example sentences as non-path content,
Which I
it's
would.
impossible for core units to come out faster than non-path content because we make the kanji
Oh,
examples for the kanji.
fair,
So we figure if there's 5 kanji in a unit, that's 20 example sentences that we wrote.
fair.
Um, Maybe more because we're not just doing onyomi kunyomi examples now. We're also doing koyumeshi, like proper nouns and irregular readings and things like that. So yeah, just by the nature of the fact that we have example sentences for each kanji, like viewable and accessible, means that we're going to have at least like 20 example sentences per unit that are not in the unit, but like they're non-path content.
Right.
So but by the end of phase 2, we basically run out of kanji to teach. So then maybe the core stuff would be faster because we wouldn't have to make all these kanji example sentences
Yeah.
just so that they show up in the little extra info box.
The production speed graphs of non-path content versus, unit content is going to be interesting to watch. Like, I want to see it. It would be cool if we could, like,
Yeah, I can imagine the graph myself. It sounds
I wonder
cool.
if we could draw it somehow. Like, we should be tracking this. Like, it'd be cool, sweet to have a dashboard. Imagine having
Yeah, we
like
should
the
build,
future
if
version
we
of
could
this,
generate it
right? Yeah,
automatically.
it
Yeah.
should. It should. It could too. To think about that, that'd be so
There's no
cool
reason it couldn't.
to
Yeah.
have a like the ultimate version of you, Niko, in the future when everything's running like a machine is you just get to like look at your dashboard of content being created
Yeah.
across many languages and like turn little dials. A little
Yeah.
more of this.
Oh,
Them's dangerous words, Caleb says,
someday.
Urslaya. When I say that it's technically possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It,
I
I
know.
don't even think it's that hard technically because it's just another thing to build is the issue.
That's the
Um,
biggest issue, the time, the
yeah.
resources. So it's a
Yeah.
dream
So
at
on
the
the
moment.
note, I should probably just clarify why I say it's exponentially easier to make non-path content than core content.
Mm.
And the reason is that we got really picky with what is a unit in NativShark.
Yep.
And a big reason is that we decided that we wanted to use contextual iterative immersion. See, so we do one new thing max being learned at a time, which means that we can't just say, okay, this unit's going to have a lesson on whatever, and then we can't tell a freelance writer go write sentences for that lesson because our platform isn't developed to the point yet where it could track which words that writer can use and which grammar
Yeah.
they can use so that they don't go over that +1 threshold. And even if we did have the technology in place for that, I don't think a freelancer could do it. I wouldn't really trust them to because it's pretty difficult to work in the constraints of you can only use these words in this grammar and you have to make sure the sentence is natural.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, basically Ray has to write every sentence for a unit or for a core material until we have another full-time employee on the content team. So that's a big reason that it's harder is that we do the +1. We have fewer people that are capable of doing it.
Yeah.
And then on that same note, at the moment, we don't have a system in place for a freelancer to write a lesson.
Mm.
And we're close to where we could have them write non-path lessons because non-path lessons do not need to know what the student has learned at that point.
Yeah.
If we have a freelancer and I tell them, here's 20 sentences related to saying happy birthday in Japanese, write a lesson on how to say happy birthday in Japanese, they should be able to do it just fine.
Right.
That's a lot different than, and this wouldn't actually be a lesson in the core unit, in a core unit, I don't think, but if we had that lesson in the core path, they couldn't just write it at random. They have to know what's been learned so far, what hasn't, of those 20 sentences, which ones are acceptable to be in this lesson. And
Mm.
should that lesson even be there? Because we want to teach this sentence, but they haven't learned that grammar yet. So this lesson's in the wrong place to begin with, which would be something that Ray would have noticed before. So like it's the whole planning thing.
Yeah.
Um, then there's the issue of the fact that we have to have a dialogue at the end of each unit, and the dialogue shouldn't have anything the student hasn't learned at that point yet. So we also need to make sure that those dialogues are created and put in the right place.
Right. So to summarize, the reason why it's significantly more difficult to make unit content than non-path content is because of the rigorous standard of quality required for a unit, and even more so, the proper implementation of contextual iterative immersion. Because right now, phase one that you can study on NativShark right now does not perfectly follow that standard at the moment. There are times where it loosely follows that, meaning something might be taught just before or just after when it would have been taught if it was done perfectly. That's correct?
Yeah. Sometimes it's not perfect right
Right.
now because we we raised our standards incrementally starting at basically the beginning of last year.
Right.
Which is why when we were doing the launch sale in January of last year, we were saying that these lessons are going to come out so fast because we had all these NihongoShark lessons,
Yes.
but we hadn't decided, oh, the content builds on itself. Oh, a dialogue should come at the end of each unit and it should only contain content the student has already learned.
Right.
Like, oh, we shouldn't teach words until we've taught the kanji that are in them.
And this kind of thing happens when you're, growing a company and a platform at the rate that we were, and when you test your hypotheses and then they don't hold up to what your expectations are, then you have to adapt, right? So we could have built a platform that just mostly reused Shark's content, but it would be so much worse than it is now. Like it would be like a fraction of how good, like this. Okay, if you go look at the learning progress channel in our Discord, our community Discord, nativeshark.com/community, go check it out. If you were to go there and you were to look at the learning progress channel and you were to read the feedback that people are providing, those who are progressing through the system, the amount of success that they're having, we wouldn't be seeing that kind of success if we hadn't started building the platform for that outcome, I guess, right? Like the guiding principle or the mission is always to make learning simple, and we do that very rigorously, right? So we were like, let's try it. If we do it like this, what would it look like? And then we're okay, that's not quite there yet. And we kept doing that until we realized that we had to restructure the content. And then at that point, we had already written some of the content. So we had to restructure the content we'd already written after we'd already come to the conclusion that we needed new content. So we did that. And at a certain point, it was like, let's get phase one out. Let's get the initial feedback. And then let's continue to adapt from there. And then that's what's brought us to where we are now, to where we now have a very robust system and we're putting the pieces together. We have something that's working with students. So now we know that if it's working this well with phase one and it's not perfect, C, when it is perfect, that will be even better, right? Like if that's sometimes it's hard to imagine, but yeah, it could be, especially those first. It's not hard to imagine the first 30 units being better, but after around unit 50, when it starts feeling really solid, it being better than that is like really exciting. Because I've done over half of phase one. I haven't been perfect with my studies on phase one, but after I got through the beginning part, because I already know a lot of Japanese, so the beginning part, like many of the students, was a bit slow for me. But after getting through that, I was like, damn, this is so nice. Like I want this in so many more languages. So that feeling, we can encapsulate that feeling, and continue to produce it, and that is ultimately why it took us the time that it did. But that's part of the process, like I don't regret any of it. I'm thankful for it, and I'm really glad that we do have this high standard to guide us towards this, because like seeing how well it's working for people, um, it's it's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think some people listening might feel like, wait, so phase one has problems? But I think part of the setting up systems and processes also involves setting up a system and process for editing a path, which includes editing a phase at any point, because we
absolutely.
have to. It doesn't matter if, for example, if phase one were perfect on the day we launched it in August, it would not be perfect now, because now when you go to stores in Japan, or at least in Tokyo, they don't give you plastic bags anymore.
Correct.
So this has suddenly become very important language, even if you're just traveling, is knowing if they're asking you, do you want a bag, or saying that you want a bag, or saying you don't need a bag. Whereas when we were making the content for phase one, that wasn't yet a big thing that you needed to know.
Yeah. Well,
It's like, that's, for example, something we're going to be adding because the language changes, the world changes. And so we had to build processes that account for that as well, because perfect is a fleeting
yeah.
concept
Okay, that's a
for
really good point. And
a path.
I did kind of gloss over that, which yeah. Well, so we'll address it like you did. Um, the system, the point of like of NativShark being a system, and why one of the motivations for us building a platform that was technology software based, that we controlled, that we built ourselves, was that exact reason. Because when we did have just lessons, or like go look at any textbook, right? It's static. Once it's done, it's done. You can't update it easily, and that's kind of pointless, because it's meant to be a language is living. It goes over time. So even it, like you said, even if we did, you know, build it perfect, because it would only been perfect for a moment. So right, the system itself is designed, um, such that it's always um, able to be updated and backdated when it needs to be. And the important part here is that we consider the student who has already gone through that content at every point. And how do we let that student, if we introduce new valuable material that they have already passed, that they should know, we have a way to source that material to that student so they can learn it. So essentially, as a student, it doesn't, if you've gone past content, you don't have to worry about something new coming up that you're gonna not know if it's really important for you to know.
On the topic of language evolving, I remember right at the beginning of the whole COVID fiasco that we all experienced last year, people in our Discord were trying to figure out how to say social distancing in Japanese.
Yeah,
There was a big thing in the news in,
in the West.
like in English news, at least,
Yeah.
like social distancing there. How do we say this? And everyone didn't know. We're making up these phrases with kanji and like words that we pulled from the dictionary. And then lo and behold, they just start saying social distance in Japanese.
That was,
So
yeah,
like the word was just created in Japanese. They just say social distance. It's like written on signs and stuff now in
yeah.
Japan, and like on the news. They just, so
Social
instead of
distance.
using their vast bank of vocabulary to make their own phrase, they just
Yoinked it.
snagged the English one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That was kind of my guess. I was like, it's gonna just be social distancing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
our community was at the forefront of the language evolving.
for sure. That was fun. Another thing to note about, there's something that evolved in 2020 that's not in phase one, is like, obviously I don't think we talk about like mask etiquette, you know, like
Yeah, yeah.
that's something we could, well, would be kind of pertinent to write about now. Um,
Yeah, although I'd like to like wait until things calm down a little bit so that we don't over adjust.
yes.
Because like I noticed just yesterday, the editor I used to work for sent me a few questions about a book he's working on that he wanted feedback on. And one of them, there was an example sentence about how I want to be a nurse or something. And like being a nurse is a stable job with like a steady income or something, was the example sentence.
Yeah.
And one of the editors said, like, I think we should change this to be something else, like nurses help people and stuff, because right now I don't think people are thinking of nurses in that light. Like it's a stable, steady job. It's like a dangerous,
Hmm.
scary job where you're exposed to viruses and stuff.
Hmm.
And then, but I was reading, I was thinking, yeah, but like the population is getting so old in Japan that like it kind of is the most stable job in the country, because you'll always have a job if you're a nurse in Japan.
Hmm.
So I was wondering if they're kind of overreacting to the current world,
Hmm.
whereas maybe they're not. Maybe people are. Maybe this is the way we're going to see nurses forever. But
Right. Right. I see what you're
that's why I
saying.
wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to like be like, oh, we got to have the thing about masks in phase 1 and mask etiquette right now, because maybe mask etiquette's going to change back to how it was a year ago or 2 years ago.
Well, even my point was
It's probably going to be somewhere in between where it is now and
right.
what it used to be.
My point was that we don't have in phase one at all about mask etiquette, and that is a thing in Japan, and that like had we been thinking about it, that could have gone in phase one pre-COVID, but then because it happened, it made it obviously, oh, okay, well, this is probably something that should be in there,
Yeah.
right? So it's like I agree with you that the lesson and the way that we describe mask etiquette should be somewhere between the two. But the point was is like it was something that we hadn't thought of that then became really important, but you can't travel here right now anyway, so like we don't need to make the lesson immediately. But now it's like we've been aware that, oh, this is a lesson that we can add, and since it's an evolving system, lessons change, we can then put that in. That's kind of the angle I was going at with it. Not necessarily that it would need to be related to COVID, because you're right, this is a moment in time, but mask etiquette does exist, and I believe that it will change in some degree in the country going forward.
I'm curious what it's going to be like in countries like the US.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't think about it, but I know in
Yeah.
Japan I'm sure it'll be slightly different
Yeah. For those who
forever.
are curious, it was based in the past, it was basically like you're expected to wear a mask if you're sick in
Right.
Japan,
Right.
or if you're just worried about getting sick, or it's probably a good idea to wear one if you go to a hospital or something, but you don't actually have to.
Yes.
Um,
I had
Whereas now, mask etiquette is don't leave your house without a mask
right.
on is the new etiquette.
I had some friends who just as soon as it would hit like flu season, they would get a flu shot and then they would wear a mask just by default for the almost the duration of flu season. So that did exist. There were people that took it
Oh
to
yeah.
that kind of level. Um, like they didn't want to get people sick. That was what they said. Like, well, I just don't want to get anyone sick. It wasn't necessarily they were worried about themselves getting sick. It was that they didn't want to get other people sick. Um, so they would get a flu shot and then wear the mask for the duration of the flu season, which was from like November to like February or something like that, or March. So
Yeah. I had a friend who used to wear her mask basically all the time. She slept in it
okay, see,
because,
wild, it
well, that
happens.
that was because she didn't want her throat to dry out because she was a singer.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
and if you like to wear makeup and you don't feel like wearing makeup one day, you could just wear your mask to hide that fact. Or if
Mm,
you have bad breath, you could wear your mask so that no one else knows except for you.
yeah, there was a Japanese podcast I was listening to where that's like it came out in like 2017, and that's what they were talking about. They're like wearing
Yeah.
masks when you're not sick. I think it was like the title of the podcast. And it was this whole thing. It was the two ladies and the guy, and they were talking about it for like an hour or something about all the situations and where they were like, isn't it great that we have this thing so that you can do it when you don't, even if you don't necessarily need to because you're not sick. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. My mom came and visited Japan in 2013 when I was teaching English here, and she loved that people wore masks. And she talked about how she wishes that she could wear one back in the US, but people would think she's crazy or something.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well,
And now she gets to wear it anywhere, anytime she wants.
I guess it happened, but through the circumstances that are unfortunate. Um, okay, so we had that question from Graham that at the end of last session we said we would answer, and we did. It was this time we just didn't. I didn't call it out specifically, but the question again was in regards to the use of NihongoShark lessons. What factors cause the decision that those lessons aren't sufficient for the core of NativShark? But just like a bit ago, and we covered that in our conversation. Um,
Partly.
part. Do you want to go in a little bit more depth on that?
Well, I mean, the other reason we couldn't use them is just the tone.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
is completely different. It was if you go read NihongoShark lessons, it's basically me just joking around and teaching while I do
Yep.
because
It was fun. It worked.
yeah, I was having fun and I just didn't want it to be boring.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of people liked it.
for sure.
And we try to do that with NativShark also, but we kind of have to avoid being a little too ridiculous.
Yeah. It's
Like you're not going to see like memes in the middle of a lesson in NativShark
right.
unless we created the meme,
Mhm.
for example.
It's
So stuff like that.
it's just it's just the evolution to being a more mass market sort of product versus what it was before. But to put it in other terms, as far as like when this decision happened, when we noted that we couldn't reuse, was when we started realizing that NativShark and NihongoShark were two completely different companies. Like, we didn't know that when we started NativShark. We kind of thought it, viewed it as a bit of an evolution of NihongoShark, but that's not true. Like when NativShark became, we renamed it and we it started a new corporation. That was the day that the NihongoShark was retired, and we just didn't quite realize that until quite a few months later. And that has been just true in so many ways. And one of those ways is like, okay, we actually couldn't reuse the content. We thought we could, but we couldn't. So yeah, it was the tone and that it wasn't written in an iterative fashion, which is like the core premise of NativShark.
Yeah, and sometimes, but not always, the Japanese would not be approved now
Right, like just
because
you guys have gotten better at
yeah,
content
because
creation.
she wrote the Japanese, like a Japanese person wrote it for the Nihongo Shark ones, but that was when you figure that was years ago, and she's had years and years to think about how do people actually talk? Like, is this
Yeah.
natural? Is this worth teaching right here? So there's sentences that would have to change.
Well, I think the big like maybe we could call it inflection point in the content creation is when we realized that Ray was a content architect. Do you remember that over the
Yeah,
summer? We were like, oh, by the way, this is actually a job. And she was like, yes, it is. This is my
yeah,
job. And I think that kind of coincides with like this more solidification of, what our content actually is as it was maturing. Not that the Nihongo Shark stuff is necessarily bad. It's just that, we evolve over time. We get better. Um, so yeah, that said, all those things said, we are looking for ways to use it still because it is a vast library. And we would like to salvage what we can from it, which might be a lot of it. It's just going to take a little bit of time and effort to figure out how we want to adjust the tone. And this kind of stuff would go into non-path content, basically.
yeah.
Because there's obviously a ton of value in there. Um, it's just going to be an interesting one to figure out and
Yeah.
kind of pick through.
So let's talk about content that has never been created.
Yeah, like
Like
new stuff, right?
specifically, I'm we're trying to figure out what we want to do with long form content. For those who don't know, long form content would be anything from a short story to an essay or something like that. Uh, and the issue here is formatting partly because we want to have all the great things that we have for a sentence. Like if you have a sentence, there's a translation and a literal breakdown, and there's audio for that sentence that you can repeat, and all those things. But what if it's that sentence is inside of a paragraph, inside of a story?
Mm,
How do you present that to a student where it's digestible and useful, but they still have all those features available to them?
right.
Something that we're working on figuring out.
And the places where this would be is, um, it would be uh, maybe late phase two. You would start seeing it in place of dialogues. I'm not sure, but I know for sure in phase three you would see it, and it would also be non-path content versions of it.
Yeah, we'd have non-path long form content for all phases, even phase
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I was just thinking like in the path itself, like in the required core, where does it start showing up? Where does long form content start showing up? And I think it's phase 3, but like, what do you think? Do you think it's in phase 2? I mean, you're pretty far into planning or outlining.
It depends, because some long form content is easier than dialogues.
Mm,
Like if we have a short story, like short stories have clear audio and very strict grammar rules
that's
being followed
that's true.
and things like that. So it's actually pretty easy
Mm, good point.
if you're at a certain level.
Right.
Um, that said, like I don't want to be hitting people with big blocks of Japanese unless they're at a level where they can get through it pretty quickly.
Right. Right. Exactly. Because we don't want to
I don't want
slow down.
roadblocks inside of units.
Yeah. We don't want to slow down the duration of time it takes to get through an individual unit, which means that that's kind of why I was saying, for sure you'd see long form content in phase 3, because by the time you get to that, it wouldn't take you very long to get through it. Like the duration of time would be the same as back in phase 1 when you were just doing your first dialogue with 3, responses. Because as you get better, you can consume content and comprehend content faster. So then therefore the unit becomes more dense, I guess is the way to put it. Like the unit density sounds all like chemistry, but yeah, the unit density increases.
Yeah, I'm just interested in what it actually looks like. To a certain extent, I feel like you could just tweak the way the dialogues work now, because you
Hmm.
get exposed to just the Japanese with audio, and then you can toggle the other stuff to be on or off.
Hmm.
That works pretty well if we have a relatively simple like short story or essay, for
Here's an
example.
yeah.
It doesn't work well if we have like
Well,
paragraphs of
okay.
stuff.
Here's what I was thinking, and I think I was maybe talking to Jacob about this. I'm not sure, but we were thinking, yeah, it could be in something that kind of looks like the dialogue thing does right now, but it'd be like a reader, right? So we build like a reader looking tool. Um, but it would like imagine the breakdowns, except for they're done by a sentence, not paragraph. So you tap on a sentence, and then you get the information that you need from it, because you don't necessarily need to see all of the literal breakdowns, all of the translations of an entire paragraph at one time. Not only do you not necessarily need to see that, but it would look it would look so bad. So doing it at the sentence level, like you tap on a sentence, that might work.
Yeah.
My question is audio. Do we have someone read the entire thing, or do we have them read it by sentence?
Depends. To start, I think we can have them do it by sentence
Hmm.
until we encounter the long form content where that doesn't work.
Fair enough.
I'm sure it's not going to work at some point, but it should work for the most part. So why not just try it that way?
Because
Because we already have a place for doing that
yeah,
as it is.
like I just want to note that, and on why I think breaking it down by sentence might be the best way to do it, besides visually, is our system understands Japanese by the sentence. So even if you write like a whole book, like our system is still going to break down the sentences by sentences, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and also if you like clicked a sentence to see its translation and stuff, I would imagine you want to hear the audio for just that sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, probably just by
Probably by
sentence.
sentence to start. Then I can kind of imagine what the visuals would look like a little bit better too. Hmm. But then,
This is
oh,
something
go
that
ahead.
we should kind of figure out soon, because we can already do it. We can already make this content. Like the systems that we've created to make content are built such that making something like a short story is not hard for us.
Hmm. I
Much easier than making a unit.
Everything's easier than making a unit.
Exponentially easier.
Yeah. Um, I think like phase rating it will be cool when it's non-path, and not only that, but like saying out what after what unit you can read it. Like that's gonna be sweet.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, um, development wise? Because you said we could like do it soon. I want to say that the soonest we could start working on that development wise would be like March.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
meant the content team can start making the content for it,
Meaning you kind
whatever
of want to know
posts.
what it's gonna look like in advance.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we could probably build like a wireframe
yeah,
anytime, like kind of loosely based it off what the dialogue section looks like.
yeah. I mean, technically speaking, we could just drop in a one-person dialogue and it would
Technically
work.
that would
Just
work,
we
but it,
want
it would look pretty bad.
yeah,
Um,
maybe.
well, depending how long you're thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, just you'd be limited in the types of long form content you could create.
Right. Right. The short long form content. Well, but then there's the problem of like it being added to the database as a dialogue, and we wouldn't actually want that.
Exactly,
So
right?
there
That's
is a
what I
bit
mean.
of effort. We're kind of booked. I mean, we're booked for the rest of January development time.
For
We're
sure.
working on the Monday and content management platform integration. So we're booked there. Oh, and then also getting streaks fixed, which I supposedly is actually fixed now. That should be going out this week. That's been
Streaks.
the
The bane
bane.
of the development team.
Oh my god, dude, the pain, the pain of streaks. Um, yeah. So there's that. Let's see. February we have. Well, now I'm just forgetting the roadmap. Oh, the placement test. And that side of oh, and user permissions on the side of the content management platform, so that to further speed up content production. So
Yeah.
user permissions.
And we should just leave a little slack in there for whatever unexpected thing comes up once we start transferring all this content into the CMP.
Right, right.
It's gonna
The
happen.
placement test and stuff is still related to yes. This is what happens just like over time. You said poor kale was melting. As conversations go on, I just slowly
Slide off the
yeah,
screen.
this is what I do. Um okay. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, it's kind of booked, but we are definitely going to leave some space because it's going to, it's not going to work the first time perfectly. So, yeah. February we'll have some space for fixing what we built in January to make sure that that works perfectly. And then like I was saying, the placement test part of things, that's still going to be interacting with the content management platform side. So we're still going to be, touching it for a bit before we go fully back to the student side.
Yeah.
Um, all right, well, we've gone for an hour and 17 minutes, and the management sync is in 26 minutes.
Oh,
And I'm gonna
man.
actually go to into the office to do it. So I gotta go. I got a bike. I gotta
Did you
run.
buy it?
No, I didn't buy a bike yet. Um,
Still using those share
yeah,
ones?
using the city bikes. There's like a station for them right behind my house. It's really convenient. Costs like Yongjuan or something to go there. It's pretty cheap. As of yet,
Still,
it's
if you do it every day for a year, that's about your bike. So
good thing I don't do it every day for a year. I've
yeah,
done that calculation. It's still
you
cheaper.
might have to pay for the bike parking depending on what it's like in Fukuoka. I don't know. It costs money in Tokyo usually, not always. Just depends where you're parking and for how long.
There's a large bike parking spot in front of the Fukuoka office, and we don't have to pay for it. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't have to
it's
pay
less
for it.
crowded down there.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, there are places where you have to pay for bike parking, but having lived in both Tokyo and Fukuoka, I can confidently say there is much more space for bikes here
Yeah,
than there is.
it's cutthroat business trying to park your bike places in
Dude,
Tokyo.
it's stressful. It's like shit.
It's a little bit stressful.
Yeah, man. It was yeah.
I was pulling out of bike parking the other day, maybe like a week ago, and then these two ladies behind me got in a fight over my bike spot, and it was really awkward.
It's
She's like,
awkward.
I was here first. What are you doing? And like,
That's so
like
classic.
I just like, got out of there
It's
real
like,
fast.
pardon me. That's so classic. I can
I felt like
imagine
I
it.
caused the fight, even though all I did was get my bike out of my spot.
Yeah. All right. Well, We got through most of our topics this time, which is nice. Let's continue next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, we didn't talk that much about what a placement test would look
Oh,
like,
that's
but
true.
we could talk about it more next time.
Yeah, we could talk about that. All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone who listened to us and participated in the chat while we did this live. For those of you who are listening to this after the fact on Spotify or Apple or whatever your podcast platform is, thank you for listening. Any final words, sir?
Yeah, thanks from me also.
All right, much appreciated. We'll talk to you guys next week.